let me tell you something. You know, what is it about you and endless war? You just seem to love war, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Gaza, you know, the thousands of dead Palestinian children that you funded. You know, don't you think that that's crazy? You are responsible for the death of thousands of Palestinian children, thousands of Ukrainian children. You love funding war.
Now I'm going to ask, a little worried, what your issue with me was. Hold, before you do, I'm going to guess blind that you used to watch Jimmy Dore. All right. Now, we're going to interview Jose Vega. He's running in New York 15 against Ritchie Torres. And there's a lot of interesting things about this race. But first, Jose, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Slightly nervous to be on here. I grew up watching you, so it's a little surreal. You know, I'm 27 years old now. I've detoured away from your show, and now you're bringing me back with some of the stuff you've been saying lately. So it's good to be here.
All right, God bless, brother. So maybe we'll get into some of our differences. And you're not running as a Democrat, so that's kind of interesting.
No, I am actually.
Oh, you are.
In the primary. I'm in the yeah. We're doing the primary and the general election. We're doing both Democrat primary and independent.
Oh, interesting. And New York's so different, it's hard to keep up with all those different rules in New York. But okay, so first off, for the folks who don't know, who's Ritchie Torres?
Ritchie Torres is an AIPAC bot tool, basically, just to put it very bluntly. He made his mark by being the youngest city council member in New York City, elected at the age of 23. He was seen as a young, up and coming progressive guy. And that is when, of course, he was bought. Suddenly he was being groomed by the Israeli lobby in 2015. He was being flown out to Israel. And then he won his congressional race in 2020. He was a very vocal supporter of Israel then. He is now the congressman of what is the poorest congressional district in the entire country. And so as a result, though, he doesn't do anything for the people here because it's of the state that it has been in for 50 years and the 6 years that he's been in Congress for. And instead, he serves the interest of a place that calls itself a country, that is currently committing mass murder.
That sounds about right. Okay, so there's other Democrats in the race. And in fact, we interviewed one of them. So Jose, why you instead of them?
Well, good question. I think because one of the reasons I actually started running, I'm 27 years old now, and I'm looking at this Epstein stuff, and I realized that a lot of this stuff was happening 15, 20, 25 years ago or so. And I'm realizing I was born basically in a post 9/11 world. I was 2 years old when 9/11 actually happened, and now I'm seeing that all of this stuff is unfurling, and basically I'm looking at the trajectory of what my life was supposed to be in those files. But as opposed to people like Michael Blake, I got in the habit of calling him Michael Fake. I never attended AIPAC conferences, nor was I calling myself the most pro-Israeli mayoral candidate as late as May of 2025, and then suddenly changed my mind because it became politically convenient. 10 days after October 7th happened, I attended an event where Rachel Maddow was speaking at a synagogue with my friend Russell Dobular of Do Dissidents, and I had stood up and I said, there's an ethnic cleansing that's about to happen, that is happening in Gaza, and you and the rest of the media are going to lie about it. That was October 17th, 2023. Okay, and not only that, but I have been challenging power for a very long time now. I have gone after people like Kamala Harris and even people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, as well as Mike Pompeo, State Department tools like Matthew Pottinger. And the biggest one was when I went after the executive editors of the New York Times. I went after the LA Times, Reuters. They were all together in a panel at the Columbia School of Journalism. And I decided to call them out on the fact that they weren't reporting on what Seymour Hersh was reporting on, which was the fact that we blew up a Nord Stream pipeline. And that embarrassed them so much because it was translated into like 9-10 different languages. It had over hundreds of millions of views, and it was the thing that they were ignoring was really their downfall. So, not only calling them out And of course, holding power accountable, which is what I know people are very hungry for right now. I don't care whether you have a D or an R next to your name. I'm going to tell the truth, and I don't care about political correctness, but it's also the ideas that actually matter, that matter more. I've been associated with the Schiller Institute and yes, the LaRouche organization for over 10 years now. Since I was about 15 years old, I've been associated with them. And the ideas are that I have gained from them is that every individual is created in the living image of a creator. And as a result, they deserve dignity, not poverty. And I believe that the Bronx should become a science center. I have had the pleasure of working with people like Daniela Scalise or Dr. Anna Maria McGowan, who was a NASA scientist who I brought around to different schools in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Manhattan, when I was in my late teens, and to inspire young people that they could be on the forefront of science and ingenuity, and that could be them, as opposed to what they are right now doomed and destined to because of lawmakers like Ritchie Torres and Hakeem Jeffries, of destitution and poverty, low literacy rates. I want to do a crash program to fix all of it. I want to do a space civilian construction corps, put the young men and women of the Bronx who are between the ages of 18 to 30 years old, to give them literacy, to give them engineering skills, to teach them how to be welders, to teach them to be city builders, so that by the time they graduate, they can be NASA STEM engineers. That's how advanced they have to be. And that is the orientation that I will be bringing to the Congress that nobody else has, because I don't treat my voters like they're dumb or with discontempt, saying I'm gonna just make things cheaper for them. I will do that, but we're gonna make sure that the people who are born after we are long gone have much better lives than we ever could have dreamed of.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you about a bunch of interesting things like your issue with AOC, the Lyndon LaRouche stuff, maybe your disagreements with me, but first, I want to show a video of you confronting Ritchie Torres. But even before we do that, I have to note, you said that Rachel Maddow would, shill for Israel and not call it what it is and a genocide. But I mean, to be fair to Rachel Maddow, she's, oh no, right, she did all of that. Okay, okay, but she's gonna speak up any second now. Any second. I mean, was it 25 million a year or whatever she's getting? Okay, anyways. So this is Jose confronting Ritchie Torres in a diner.
Let me tell you something, what is it about you and endless war? You just seem to love war, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Gaza, the thousands of dead Palestinian children that you funded. Don't you think that that's crazy? You are responsible for the death of thousands of Palestinian children, thousands of Ukrainian children. You love funding war. You love funding genocide. Listen, the crown prince of genocide is here, thinking he can just get away by sitting here and eating comfortably while there are thousands of Palestinian children who have to suffer because of the decisions of this guy.
Look, I have mixed feelings about that, Jose, because then on the left, the right, politicians, media, nobody can get a meal because somebody's gonna be agitated about something and we're all yelling at each other and it's a mess. On the other hand, we have no access to these politicians. We can't meet with them unless we bring at least a $5,000 check. And since they're so corrupt and since they're the worst of us, and especially on this, where he's like, yeah, I know they're committing a genocide and they've killed 20,000 children, but my check cleared and it was a big one, right? So I gotta say, hats off on that. So was that security and what happened after what we saw on tape there?
Well, basically, first of all, just to your point, I mean, if Ritchie Torres was holding town halls even once a year, I wouldn't think about confronting him at a diner, right? And this is true for all the politicians I have confronted. Usually they hold town halls, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. When I first confronted her in 2022, that was at a town hall. The last time Ritchie Torres held a town hall was February of 2023, at least that I knew of. And I was there confronting him on his complicity in being a paid tool of Israel. I told him there, I understand that you're a political tool for the lobby of Israel in February of 2023. That was the last time he actually held a town hall. Now, what you saw there was me confronting him at a diner, and then he decided to just run away as opposed to answer for anything that I had actually brought up. And instead of actually directly, saying anything about it or responding to my claims, what he has done is he has used his tools, his Epstein class supporters to smear me. So what happened after that clip was, I just went home, I uploaded it went viral, and you played it here. But ever since then, the congressman and the people in the media that prop him up have been putting out direct attacks on me, calling me an anti-Semite for saying that Ritchie Torres is owned by Zionists. Now, that is true, but it's not the whole truth. It's what I call the Epstein class. The Jerusalem Post has put out a giant hit piece and an expose on me. Canary Mission just 2 days ago has decided to put out a hit piece on me as well.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I saw Anna Kasparian's her video talking about Canary Mission, how it's foreign interference, which is exactly what's going on here in my race, and she's right. Democrats were crying Russia, Russia, Russia for 4 years, but when we see clear, direct evidence of foreign election interference, not just through AIPAC, but stuff like Canary Mission and other things, and the Jerusalem Post clearly writing smear pieces that are lies on me, what else am I supposed to think other than foreign election interference? So that's what has happened since that video has been published. They are trying to smear me, lie about me, and ruin my reputation. They try to hack into my devices every day. I get 3 different authentication code requests every hour. I get emails from my various accounts saying, hey, did you forget your password? Here's the password reset thing. They are trying everything they can to surveil me, hack into what I'm doing, and they're doing this specifically because of what I did there by embarrassing Ritchie Torres and showing to the world what a coward he is and how easy they fall apart, which is why he doesn't do town halls that are publicly announced anymore. No, he has to set up, like today, he did something with Hakeem Jeffries, where Hakeem Jeffries was endorsing him in the Bronx, and it wasn't publicly announced. It was just something for Democrat insiders to attend.
Yeah, that's so surprising that Hakeem Jeffries would back him. Okay, so, and welcome to the club, brother. So I always assume the Israelis are following everything I do based on a great number of pieces of evidence. And every once in a while, I'll wave to the camera and be like, hi, Mossad, at home. And what Mossad has found out so far about me is, God, that is the dullest guy in the world off air. Right? We just can't get anything on this guy. All right, anyways, so look, going after Pelosi, Jeffries, Torres, that all makes sense. They're all bought, not just by Israel, but by big pharma, military industrial complex, and on and on and on, right? So how about Pelosi? I'm sorry, AOC, what was your issue with her?
I can understand why you mix them up, but basically my relationship with AOC is a complicated one. I was originally a Bernie Sanders supporter. The first time I could vote was in 2016. And I remember talking with my high school teacher about Bernie Sanders and being really excited about him. And when he lost the primary election and refused to call out the fact that Hillary Clinton was conspiring with the DNC, I was very upset. But AOC to me seemed to be at the time, as she was for many, a breath of fresh air. I honestly believed her. I saw her on Glenn Greenwald's show, talking about Edward Snowden. And that was something to me at the point, I think I was 19, 20 years old or so. And in fact, I wrote an email to her campaign after she won because I was living in a basement apartment in the Bronx at the time where the ceiling had caved in because sewage water had pooled in the top. And I reached out to her asking if she would be willing to shed some light on this, because it was happening in the Bronx. Now, she didn't write back, and I understand. You're busy. You just did something historic. That was totally okay. But the blinders started coming off when she said she was going to withhold her vote to Nancy Pelosi unless she would bring Medicare for all to the floor. that she and the squad would hold their ground, and they didn't. Now, for me, I'm a big foreign policy guy too, and the war in Ukraine had broken out, and I can understand why you may want to support, giving money to Ukraine, but I would think that AOC would understand the CIA's role in the sort of meddling and starting of that war. And that to me was the big indicator that she is not understanding how she is being played by the Congress. And at this point, she has been completely co-opted. And so I intervened on her in October of 2022, but that was also more so calling her what I thought was a sellout. And I think I was right. I look at the DNC convention, going out on that stage saying that the Harris campaign was working tirelessly around the clock for a ceasefire, which we later found out just wasn't true. The Biden administration was putting no pressure on the Israelis to put a ceasefire, and just not withholding her endorsement unless there was some kind of embargo put in place. And then only after talking about it, after Trump has won, after the Republicans took back the House and the Senate to say, I privately excoriated President Biden, telling him that he was wrong, and she's sitting there next to Bernie Sanders saying the same thing. I think the thing about AOC and why I criticize her the most, well, I don't criticize her the most, I think why she gets the most criticism is because she is, one of the loudest voices that progressives have in the Congress. And there's a lot of responsibility with that. And if it's constantly kowtowing, to the establishment and not actually challenging power in a meaningful way, then what good is it if you're just paying lip service, but you're not actually doing actions that will raise the tension in people's minds to say, what? Hey, maybe I won't vote for Harris unless she does do some kind of embargo or does say she can do a ceasefire. Instead, just putting your full-throated endorsement in it because Trump is the worst option is not good enough anymore. We have to demand better of our leaders.
Yeah, so I get it. And so she's supposed to represent us more than Ritchie Torres is, right? We didn't have any expectations on Ritchie Torres. We had some expectations on AOC, and I get what AOC is saying. I'm trying to balance the pressures of the establishment with our voters, but ultimately I agree with you. Yeah, but you're not supposed to make that balance. You were actually supposed to be like a ferocious fighter for us because everyone else is taking in the interests of the establishment plenty. We don't need it, right? So okay, so that I get that. Now I'm going to ask, a little worried, what your issue with me was. Hold, before you do, I'm going to guess blind that you used to watch Jimmy Dore.
I still do. I like Jimmy a lot.
Okay,
but
how
that's
good am
not
I?
my problem.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but that's not my problem with you. I watch people who have views that diverge from one another all the time.
God bless.
My issue with you was because you actually called me out after I had called out AOC. I think you had said something mean about me going after AOC, saying this isn't right or something like that, and I wasn't offended or anything, but I was just like, damn, and that's what it was. And the reason that you've been winning me back is because I've been seeing you sort of like you've been making strides to reach out to the other side, which I don't really believe there's another side. But you're having conversations, whether it's people like Alex Jones or other people saying, what, let's just decide to talk to people who we think might have different views. What I've been able to see from that, honestly, has just been that actually there is no such thing as a different side. It's just that people do want the same thing. They have different ideas of how to get it, but we've all been screwed by the same system. And so to be able to have the sort of courage and bravery to say, what, I am gonna go talk to somebody who disagrees with me, or I am gonna have the courage to go and talk to somebody who doesn't think the same way I do. I respect that a lot, like a lot. And that's part of the reason why I've started watching your show again. I saw Anna's analysis of Canary Mission a month ago when it happened. That's why I knew when they were hitting me, I was like, oh, well, great. Yeah, foreign interference. Here's another example of it too.
Yeah.
And so, that's sort of my, I guess, yeah, that's it doesn't mean much to me anymore because here we are now.
Yeah, I remember now because we've covered so many stories, and actually the last interview I did on Friday, a reverend was like, "Oh, you said amazing things about me 10 years ago," and I was like, "Oh, yes, okay." But in your case, I remember now you were interrupting her town hall, and I thought you were being unfair about Ukraine at that point. That she was not the primary person responsible for Ukraine, et cetera. But we talked about that a minute ago. In fact, now I read something about Leviathan, which is the giant gas field in Israel, and how they're trying to get it over to Europe. And I thought, wait, are we sure we bombed that streamline? Or was it our special ally? Because they're gonna need the gas from somewhere. Okay, so but anyways, that's a whole different topic. But look, I like that attitude, which is, yeah, okay, we disagreed about that. So what, right? Let's move on. Let's figure out what we can do together. And yeah, the sides are both true and an illusion at the same time. The number one thing that people in power want you to do is to fight each other, right? And so, for God's sake, look up, look up. So now, along those lines, though, you were with the Lyndon LaRouche folks. You mentioned it earlier. Not a hit job or anything. I'm just genuinely curious. Like, what was that about? Why did you go in that direction? What do you think about it these days?
Oh, well, I'm still very much associated with the LaRouche organization, and I work with the Schiller Institute, which is a sister organization, which is, hosted and held up by Helga Zepp-LaRouche. And she has been doing tremendous work internationally, and it's good. Every Friday she hosts what's called the International Peace Coalition calls. And she's had on people like Dr. Naledi Pandor. Dr. Naledi Pandor brought the case to the International Court of Justice against Israel. Not only that, she's been having former diplomats on and people who are around circles of government. She's had on Palestinian ambassador to Denmark on. I mean, the work that we've been doing on this sort of playing field of like, we can actually work with other countries through mutual development as opposed to treating every country like an enemy was what was attractive to me in 2014, 15. That was about the time I was joining. I was a high schooler. And you Google Lyndon LaRouche, right? I mean, I had Google back then too. And it was like cult leader, they were cult, this, that, and the other. And the thing that they got mocked for, big time controversially, was because Lyndon LaRouche had the audacity to say that the British crown and its debauchery and its degeneracy was one of the leading causes that was bleeding into its foreign policy, that was leading to a lot of death and destruction. And while back then he was laughed at it, you look at what's coming out of the Epstein files now. Okay, and then you start realizing, wait a minute, this guy was actually on to something. And here's something for you, Cenk. I know you've been questioning a lot of the 9/11 narrative. Why was it that Lyndon LaRouche was on the radio as it happened? And the first thing he said when he first got word, he said, they're gonna blame Osama bin Laden. Don't let them get away with that lie. And when I found that out, I was like, well, wow. Excuse me, how the heck did this guy know, that had happened? And I was just like completely, blown away by that. And but the real thing, the real reason why I decided, to call myself a LaRouche member, bear the whips and scorns of embarrassment, was because he was right. And he told the truth, which is that we can treat every human being with dignity, and that we should have a government and a policy that reflects, development of the mind, of reason, of creativity, because the greatest resource in any economy is the mind. In other words, your ability to come up with creative solutions and ideas that can actually better the world, make the world a better place. And that's not through, investing in military industrial weapons, bombs. No, it's through investing in better education, better schools, teaching people 3-4 languages, getting them to do, foreign exchange student studies, and also development in infrastructure too, and not only that, he was a real threat to power. I honestly believe that if people took a second, to revisit this stuff, especially in the light of the Epstein stuff, they would ask themselves, why was Henry Kissinger, Lyndon LaRouche's #1 biggest enemy? Henry Kissinger was writing letters personally to the FBI saying, we need to do something about this guy. George H. Bush, same thing. The whole LaRouche thing, I think, is one of the greatest miscarriages of justice. And that was something former Attorney General Ramsey Clark had said. And so, you know what? I'm sticking to my principles of what I know is true. This guy was mistreated and was totally slandered at a time when there was no internet. And that reputation stuck unjustly and unfairly. And so I would say, in the way people are starting to revisit what they thought about Noam Chomsky, they should revisit what they thought and think about Lyndon LaRouche and read what he actually had to say, as opposed to what other people said he said.
Yeah, well, I'm rethinking everything. So I remember thinking Lyndon LaRouche was absolutely crazy. And I don't remember any of the specifics. I'm not saying he's not crazy. I'm not saying anything about him, okay?
Sure.
Because I got to go back and look to see what he said. But I did notice that his name was on a list. Some Israeli leader said, oh yeah, we knocked out anyone who was against us. Pat Buchanan, Lyndon LaRouche, and named a bunch of people. And I was like, uh-oh. Do I have to go back and read Lyndon LaRouche to see if he was right or not? So it did make me question. I'm not vouching. I have no idea, but I'll go back and look, because honestly, I thought our government lied to us. I don't know if you pressed me on a percentage. Maybe I would have said 25% of the time. Now I'm beginning to think it's 75% of the time. Or even if it's just 25%, it's like the 25% that's the most important stuff. Who's actually running the country, all these giant events that have happened that are outrageous. So who knows? So am I gonna judge you for that? No, I'm past it. Okay.
Oh, and I've bared the whips and scorns, like I said. Look, listen, it's the first thing when people would bring me on a podcast. It's like, well, you did this thing, but also, what's this LaRouche thing, man? Yeah. And it's one thing, and it's another reason why people should know I'm not going to sell them out. You think about it, right?
Hold on, Jose. Hold on.
Yeah,
because one of our members asked about that. So Kara's helping me out. She's our community director, getting your questions to me. CB1 asked, how much pushback are you getting from the DNC? And then Spider-Man Dragon asked about whether you'll investigate Trump and stuff. But I think the essence of these questions are basically, is the DNC pushing back against you, and how do we know you'll stay true if you go into Congress?
Well, to the first question, yes, they are. And you see that because Ritchie Torres has been securing endorsements. Like, for example, he got endorsed by the Congressional Black Caucus PAC. He got endorsed by Hakeem Jeffries, who's a Democrat minority leader. I mean, that right there goes to show you that the DNC, of course, is going to, fight tooth and nail to prevent me from probably even getting on the ballot. We have to collect signatures like every other Democratic candidate does, but we're pretty confident that we may be able to get through that. But despite that, of course, he's also appearing with local Democratic officials. The Bronx borough president, who recently approved the casino to be built here in the poorest congressional district in the country. Taking photo ops. Having him speak at her recent re-election re-inauguration ceremony. He's doing a tour with all the city council members of of the borough as well. Sort of doing a show of force that, hey, the local establishment wants me here. There's a reason the local establishment, has had the power it has had for 50 years, and the Bronx looked the way it does. Okay, you're not going to see me get any endorsement, certainly not from Hakeem or Chuck Schumer. Now, to the second question, how do we know you're not going to sell us out? You understand that, at any point, I could have made a personal decision where I said, look, listen, this LaRouche thing is dragging me, it's slowing me down, people can't get past it, whatever. Maybe I should just drop it, for the sake of going further in my political career. I have never at one point believed that to be possible or true. At the moment you start making concessions like that on the basis of making decisions on something that can advance you politically or advance your fame further, you have already sold your soul. And I refuse to do that. I know that Lyndon LaRouche was mistreated, and I know that to be true. And I'm not asking you to believe that or vouch for that. I'm asking for you to just investigate it, and that's all I'll say on that. But that's my proof. I try to do things on principle of what I think is right, and I make mistakes like anybody else, but I promise you I will always lead by a principle that I will go by what I believe to be true and what I know to be true as well. And you can see that also, I've confronted people, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. Can you think about it, right? I could be saying things like, actually, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I was wrong, and please endorse me. Bernie Sanders, please endorse me. I'm sure that would mean a lot. in my race right now. But I'm not gonna do that because I'm just standing on what I know to be true. And the thing I believe the most is that the voters in the Bronx who have given up on voting need a reason to believe again. And that's very difficult to do right now, because I talk to a lot of people who haven't voted in decades, and they say, well, why are you any different? And I say, because I'm not gonna lie to you. And they say, oh yeah, you're just like every other politician who says that too. And I say, no. You and I agree, yeah, Trump is a problem, sure. But what about Hakeem Jeffries? What about Chuck Schumer? What about any of these other Democrats? They haven't done anything for us in the Bronx. It's time to have somebody who won't treat you with contempt.
Yeah, so I got a last couple of questions here, and I'm not endorsing anybody in the race, and I'd have to do more research, etc. But I will give you this, Jose. You would be an RPG inside of Congress. Yeah. Okay, and it would be kind of interesting to watch. And I'm positive you're not hiding your real opinions. Like, there's no question about that. Which, by the way, it's like already puts you above 90%, 98% of politicians. So his website, by the way, is votevega.nyc. We'll have the link down below, votevega.nyc. All right, so two are fun, and then the last one serious. I like to ask this of everyone. I've added one to my usual favorite. So one is, what's your favorite TV show that you're watching now?
Oh my God. I don't know if I've had time to even watch TV shows right now.
It's okay, give me the last one.
The last one I watched was Severance. That one was a lot of fun.
Okay, good. Severance is solid, makes you think. And in high school, what extracurricular activities did you do? Sports, band, key club?
Oh, this is a great question, because I was part of a chorus, and I was also doing robotics at the time too, which kind of blended my love for both. But also, I was a camp counselor at a summer program that was hosted by the Foundation for the Revival of Classical Culture. And I had also attended as a student and a camp counselor throughout my entire high school career, pretty much. Getting a deeper understanding of the classics, getting a deeper understanding of poetry and why it's so important to have beautiful culture, especially in the minds of a young person. You have to teach them what it means to be a human being. And I think great poetry, Shakespeare and Edgar Poe, it's the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country today. And Edgar Poe was definitely an American patriot. A lot of people don't know that, but I do a thing on my YouTube channel every Friday on that. But yeah, and that's what I did pretty much my entire 4 years in high school, was reading poetry, learning how to sing classical music. I'm a baritone, and doing robotics too, and doing science as well. Like astronomy, Johannes Kepler, and yeah.
I mean, if I had seen that back then, my guess would have been that you would design singing robots. Man, I would have been wrong about that one. Okay, but I get it. You're interested in exploring ideas, and I appreciate that. All right, last thing serious, which is what we ask everybody on this show, which is, if you could change one thing to get our government back, what would it be?
It has to be mentality, mindset, and an appreciation for history. I mentioned that it's the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country. And I think that it's important that people look at the best aspects of our history. I understand that American history is very, very, mixed, and oftentimes it's important that we look at like for example, Gouverneur Morris. Gouverneur Morris is a founding father from the Bronx. A lot of people don't know that, yet he wrote the words, "We the people of the United States." He wrote the preamble, and he stood up at the Constitutional Convention and he denounced slavery. But American history is not just what happened on 250 years ago. It's people like Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., two people who have quoted, our founding fathers and what we did on the 4th of July of 1776, because they were the continuance of that process of making that more perfect union. And I would say that I would change the minds of American citizens to think independently and to think about declaring their independence this year. Because this year we have to declare our independence from the Epstein class, tap into what makes America, America. which is that a process of we may not agree on the way to get there, but we want a more perfect union. And that is something that we try to do here all the time. I have high school interns now that we read the Declaration of Independence and we ask questions like, well, that document is your document, right? Are all men created equal? Well, maybe you may not have believed that in 1776, but you know what? It's your document now, and you better use it and make something with it and make a revolution with it, because a revolution is a state of mind. It's not a time, place, or specific period. It's what you believe, it's what you think, and it's what you're willing to act on. That's what makes a revolution possible. That's what I think is embedded in the Declaration of Independence. And so I would just say that if more people knew that, we would not have the government that we would have, and I would be able to design singing robots instead of running for Congress.
Okay, I like it. And you gave me an idea there. On the 250th anniversary, it would be great if America declared its independence from Israel. That would be phenomenal. All right, Jose Vega, everybody, he's running in New York 15. His website is votevega.nyc. And as you can tell, the brother's got some ideas and he's not shy about sharing them. So Jose, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.